Cindy Williams is an actress and comedian who has starred in some of the most notable movies and television programs in entertainment history. Cindy's lengthy list of groundbreaking achievements includes Laverne and Shirley, Happy Days, The Conversation, and American Graffiti. Cindy's passion for performing is deeply rooted in theater, and she travels with wonderful shows all over the country, including a stint on Broadway in The Drowsy Chaperone. This is all according to her author page on Amazon.com, so it must be true. Welcome, Cindy.
Yay!
Well, thanks for having me. Say, gang, are there any koala bears involved in any of those films that you were talking about?
Not to my knowledge.
Because I'd be very interested. I know there are no dogs, but koala bears, it seems.
The koala bear would have been too warm and fuzzy for Power of the Dog.
Okay.
It would have made people smile instead of scare the crap out of them.
And they were pretending to be in Montana, so that would have been something that the internet...
Is this like mystical craziness, that scares you, like a horror movie?
No, it's just a sense of foreboding. This guy, Phil Burbank, is, played brilliantly by Benedict Cumberbatch, is just a dark force. And things are not going to end well. They would have to travel too far to get a smile out of you at the end of this movie.
Yeah, he's a different type of, he's not like that kind of nerdy sort of professorial guy that he often plays, and he's extremely handsome in every movie because that's his face, but he's just dark and sinister. Is that too strong a word?
No.
Okay.
No, he's the menace of the whole movie.
Yeah, you'll like it.
Like he might be hiding a switchblade on
there
himself.
There you go.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And secrets.
Secrets.
Yeah.
No, it's good. It's a master class in acting. Every single person in it is beyond. And this child, McPhee, Cody McPhee, is unbelievable. You're going to hear a lot about this.
But he needs a sandwich. He's awfully thin.
He is thin. That was part of the point. He had to be delicate and effeminate. Yeah, he does.
Yeah, he does. So, Cindy, oh my God.
Yes,
I love your book so much.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
It was delish. It was just like hanging out with you. And I did read some of the reviews. And did you know that people like Henry Winkler are just raving about this book? Henry wrote, Cindy Williams, talented in everything she does. Writing her book is no exception. Get ready to enjoy. And then Ron Howard wrote, Cindy's book brings back a lot of great personal memories, but it also entertained the hell out of me. The lady can write. And then Harrison Ford, who wrote... Everyone's reading the book, Cindy. A great read. I couldn't put it down. Not a word of it is true. Cindy who?
I know. That's Harrison.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for reading that, Louise. Thank you.
But let's start with your childhood because, you're such a just innately talented and deep person, but your childhood was lonely, a little bit lonely and tough. And you mustered through a lot of maybe unhealthy family dynamics.
Well, yes. Yes, I did. I grew up in Texas, and for the most part, and my dad was the funniest man I have ever known, and just a great, fabulous guy. But he drank, and he was an alcoholic. And when he drank, he turned into somebody else. And he worked during the day, and my mother worked as a waitress during the night. And so when he would come home from work at 4 o'clock, from the time I was a little girl, he'd put me in the truck. And we were in Texas, as I said, and we'd go to the bars. And he'd lock me in the truck. He'd buy me candy, lock me in the truck, and then he'd go into the bars and he'd drink. And I was always worried from a young age that we were going to get into a car accident or he'd be arrested or something. So I was always on the lookout like that. And it did, it changes a person. I'd be in the truck and he'd park in front of the bar, and in the window, I remember this so vividly, I would see Schlitz.
Oh my.
Schlitz.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't it ironic that, on a neon sign advertising the beer in the bar, but then later on, it just hit me one day when I was on the set of Laverne and Shirley, shots.
That was
my God,
and that's what
right.
They wrote. That's what they took shots from.
If it were a book, we'd call it foreshadowing, but I think it was the universe just kind of...
Exactly. That's it. It was the universe, Louise. Mm-hmm. And all those kind of things have happened to me. And that's really kind of a fun, happy thing that came out of something, talk about foreboding. So my childhood was, it was rife with foreboding moments. But that's not to say that, it didn't have a happy note to it, because as I said, my dad was the funniest man I ever knew. And when he was sober, it was wonderful. Far and few between, but still. And my family, I come from a family on the Williams side that are very funny people. Mm-hmm. They're just funny, just verbose and funny people. So that saved me. Plus, and I talk about this a little bit in my show that I'm doing, and I may have talked about it in the book too, that my dad would always drop me off at a different church every Sunday and tell me, Cindy, go in there and find the Sunday school and go to Sunday school. Church of Christ, Methodist Church, Baptist Church, Tent Revival. I want a Bible for perfect attendance at Tent Revival. So this also, just saved me, because I had these wonderful Bible stories in Sunday school about Jesus and Good Samaritans and wonderful people. And so from that, I just garnered from a young age, faith, and that everything was going to be okay. And it did. It turned out A-okay.
And you and your father also had humor in common, because it used to be that you and your dad would watch television, or he'd be watching TV and somebody funny would come on and he'd say, come in here, Cindy, you'll love this guy.
Thank you for that, Fritz. Yes, he did. He would. He turned me on to your show of shows, Sid Caesar and Imogene Coca, and I remember sitting there and with him and thinking, I love this. I can do that. But I was very, very young. But in my own mind, my own childish ways, I said, I can do that. I love that, and it just made me so happy. And he. Toward the end of his life, he called me in and he said, I was going actually to my first interview. And he called me in and he said, Cindy, look at this. This guy is a fabulous singer. And it was Bob Dylan. And my dad was pretty hip. And as you say, he turned me on to wonderful, wonderful things.
And there's another piece to that. And it's that your dad knew you and you knew your dad knew you. And sharing those moments with you, they resonate with you still today, because he believed in you and he knew if he liked it, you were going to like it, because you guys had that bond. And that's really special.
Right. Well, I think, I did bond with my father in the most loving way, aside from it was horrible when he drank. But aside from that, the love that my father, that his real self had, and the humor and everything else, he was protective of me, and I just knew that. And so you're right, that bonding was there. And I think it is with children, because my dad was a good guy. He wasn't a bad guy. He was a good guy, but he just, the alcoholism overtook him.
Yeah. I don't want to get too far ahead of your youth, because you spent part of your youth, the teenage part, here in the San Fernando Valley in Southern California, Birmingham High School. You lived near Reseda or in Reseda, correct? The north and northwest part of the San Fernando Valley. And I just think you and Penny, but in particular you, were so relatable to most Americans, which is 50% of what made your character so delicious for people, was that you just seemed so regular and relatable. And I read about where you spent your time, and the San Fernando Valley is like suburban America. Yeah. I mean, for people who aren't familiar with it, it's the suburbs of Los Angeles. And I think maybe your experience in and around Southern California was sort of what really kept your feet grounded and made you so relatable.
You're so right, Fritz, with that, because I went to church again. I went to the First Methodist Church of Reseda. I went to church camp. I was involved in all the church talent shows and everything else, youth camp, and plus high school. It was in the days when it was a community, and they wrote Shirley as that person who was always down to earth. Both the characters were pretty down to earth, and Penny and I knew we had to be true to that. We had to have the integrity of those characters, and to make the comedy work, especially. And I, my folks were blue collar workers. So my dad and my mom. My mom was a waitress, and my dad he was very, very bright, my dad, but he just didn't want to. He only had a third grade education, but they wanted to make him manager at Bunko Ramo Woolridge, the big, I don't know, they built missiles and computers out in the valley. But it was a household like that, and it was a childhood. When I got into my teens, it was like that. All the neighbor kids, and that sense of familial sense of community, if you will, and that played right in to the two characters on the show. Now, Penny was from the Bronx, but had the same type of girlhood, childhood as I did, only from the Bronx. She girlfriends, and she, her mother owned a dance studio, and she tap danced, and they all went to camp together. And so I think that, as you said, Fritz, yes, we always kept our feet on the ground. That was the only way that show was going to work, was to maintain that sensibility.
To me, what got you that show, or maybe the most important moment in your book, is when you describe how, since you and Penny had been writing together, as you were driving over, you said, "What business can we do?" And it was that business that you did that got you the spinoff, in my opinion. Can you tell that story?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, Penny and I were writers together on this movie. That's a whole other story. But when Gary called us to do, he said, "I've got these two characters on Happy Days. They go on a double date with Fonzie and Richie. And they're called Laverne and Shirley. And they're two girls who date the fleet." That's how he described them to us. And so we went, so Penny and I thought, girls who date the fleet, hookers. And so we decided that we were going to play the characters chewing gum, smoking cigarettes. Now, mind you, Penny and I, neither one of us, even though Happy Days was her brother's show, was Gary Marshall's show, she'd never seen an episode of it, nor had I.
Oh, my God.
This time. So we thought we'd smoke cigarettes, chew gum. We were going to go in and have pin curls in our hair, and take each other's pin curls out of it. This is our first entrance. This is what we decided to do. And then we were going to fix each other's bra straps and slip, we're smoking like that. So
while you're arguing with each other.
Yeah, while we're bickering.
Yeah.
So we make this entrance, and we do that. We stop and we do all that business, and then we take drags off our cigarette, and we're really smoking. Chewing our gum and smoke. We take drags off our cigarettes. We look around the room. We spot Richie and Fonzie. Take a last drag. We flick our cigarettes across the stage, and we start walking toward them. And Jerry Paris, who was directing Happy Days, screams, "Cut! Stop it!" He said, "What is that? What is that you were doing? Smoking? There's no smoking in Family Hour." And then he said, "What do you think you're doing? A spinoff? Now get backstage, rework it, and enter again."
More foreshadowing.
So we went backstage, and Penny and I were like, we were terrified now. So we got rid of the cigarettes. We kept the gum, and we kept the pin curls. And while we're doing this, talking about it, I said, "What's a spinoff?" And she goes, "I don't know. What's Family Hour?" I said, "I don't know." So we reworked it, and we went out, and then we did the show. It took a week, and then we went back to our little writing job. And then 2 weeks later, they called us, and they said, "ABC saw this episode, and they loved it, and they want to do a spinoff."
Wow!
And we said, "What?" And they said a spinoff of the two characters. And we had to have it explained to us what a spinoff was. And they said, it's your own show. And we still couldn't compute that. But anyway, that's how that came down.
But about setting your own business, you guys created most of your own physical stunts for the show, didn't you? I mean, that was a part that was unwritten, and they allowed you and Penny to come up with the gags yourselves.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, because they tried to write them for us, and then we just reworked them on stage ourselves. And then they come down and watch a run through, and they usually loved it. And we had this litmus test, if you will, during rehearsal. If something we did or said, or if the story was going the wrong way, if it didn't make us during rehearsal, me and Penny, laugh out loud, then we'd rework it, because we figured it was not, if it made us laugh out loud, we knew it was going to make the audience that came in, because we shot it in front of a audience of over 200 people. We figured if it made us laugh out loud during rehearsal, it was going to make the studio audience laugh out loud and then translate to the home audience. So we would always go for that laugh out loud, and no matter how stupid and silly, we had to get for it.
And it worked.
Some great physical gags.
Now, was it one of the first blue-collar sitcoms that resonated with maybe people that weren't the father knows best type of family?
Well, I think All in the Family came before us, but it certainly wasn't. Ours was more physical, and
young ladies that worked.
And women who worked, yeah. Penny and I were neither one of us, we didn't sign the contract to be feminists, but we just were what we were. Mm-hmm. And people kept saying, oh, this is a feminist show. This is about two women. We go, yeah, it's about us. Because both of us had struggled to make ends meet in college. Both of us had that background. And so, it was just a natural occurrence that it was about two women who really had to have the wolf nipping at their heels, which Penny and I always insisted on, that it had to be a story about, we can't pay the electric bill. We can't, we have to put ends together to pay the rent. And there's always that desperation, because that really helped the comedy. And that is blue collar. And that's my mom and dad. And that was not necessarily Penny's mom and dad, but that was her when she went to school and had to struggle. Mm-hmm. And so we understood that struggle. And it's a human, everyman struggle that everyone can understand. And you put it to story and then to physical comedy, and you've got kind of an across the board, great show. But the other thing was, Louise and Fritz, we had back in those days, and you'll remember this, we had censors that were delegated to each show. And the censor on our show, who watched the script, for words and the storylines and everything else we did, he was a born-again Christian, fabulous guy, and he wouldn't let us get away with diddly squat. So I don't think we could have said diddly squat. So we had to invent around it, and that made the show better.
And that's how you came up with Fodio. What did you call it?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Well, we didn't come up with it. I think that was a Lowell Gantz genius bit of line. Yeah. But yes, things like that. Exactly.
But going back to struggle, even after you have a modicum of success, the struggle never stops. Because after American Graffiti, didn't you have to go back to being a waitress for a while before you?
I was thinking about it.
Oh, okay.
Because I didn't work for a long time, and and I was thinking, well, I can't wait tables in LA, because I'd waited tables all through college.
Right.
But I knew I couldn't in LA because I was recognized there, and I just didn't want.
Oh, that's interesting.
I just didn't want to do it. So I was going to go up to Eugene, Oregon, which is a place I love and a university town, and wait tables. And that happened right before Laverne and Shirley happened. I had talked to my mother and said, "Can I borrow $200 from you? And I'll pay you back as soon as I get this job." That's how it went. And then the next day, it seemed I was doing Laverne and Shirley and making, money I couldn't fathom.
But your relationship with Penny was already complicated because she had kind of walked away and wasn't returning your calls. And now you get this offer and you're feeling kind of hurt. This is your friend that you bonded with, and what's going on? So
yeah, I think you're referring, Louise, to when we were writing together.
Yeah.
And she like disappeared and I couldn't find her. And we had all these writing assignments. We were writing this bicentennial spoof for Francis Coppola was producing it, and it was called My Country 'Tis of Thee. And it was supposed to be released during the bicentennial. And it was all, sketches and music and comedy about the making, about America from the time the Pilgrims came over, and everyone was assigned sketches. We had Sutter's Mill and the U.S. Patent Office and the Salem witch trials.
Yes.
And talk about some of the other writers that you used. Steve Martin was a writer on
Steve
that.
Martin, Martin Mull, Harry Shearer.
Oh my goodness.
Oh gosh, it's all going out of my head. But yes, Steve and Carl Gottlieb, and amazing writers. But they were teams of writers, and so we were the skirts. We were the female writing team. But during that time, and this is after we had shot the Happy Days episode, and they wanted to make it into, they wanted to spin it off. Mm-hmm. Penny just, she disappeared on me. And so I had all these I had 2 assignments and I couldn't find her anywhere. And then, I thought, gee, I don't really want to do this show because, and Penny and I've talked about this, because she disappeared on me, and how can I have a bad feeling. And so that's when I was going to go to Oregon and wait tables. And then she showed up, and they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. I'll put it that way.
Did she explain what she was going through? Because maybe she had her own struggles of being creating herself.
It wasn't anything that would have gone in the power of the dog.
Got it.
It was just, there were so many fun people over at the studio that time that she'd go off and have fun and write with them.
Oh my gosh.
And didn't bother to tell me, which ticked me off.
Yeah.
And, but all's well that ends well.
You said something in your book which was very similar to what we heard from Anson Williams talking about the success of Happy Days, and that is you guys are hard at work doing the day-to-day, hard, long hours of creating a television show, and you're living in a bubble. And you had no sense of how popular the show was until you and Penny would go out on press junkets and personal appearances and saw these insane reactions in these little towns all over America that finally made you realize, oh my God, this is a huge hit we're involved in here. Talk about those emotions, especially when you're in your early 20s. That's probably hard to get your head wrapped around.
Well, the first thing that happened was right after the show was aired, the first episode, Gary came down to the set the next day, and he was just so gleeful, and he showed us the numbers, the overnights, mm-hmm. which are the numbers of how many people viewed the show. Mm-hmm. And he shows this number, Penny and me, and it was like, it was more than 36 million. I don't know the exact number, but it was like up in the millions and millions. Mm-hmm. And Penny and I just stared at it, and everyone's cheering and applauding. We had no sense of what that meant.
Yeah.
And so the first time, like Anson said, we were constantly on the set because we did the show like a play. We rehearsed it 4 days, and then the 5th day when we were going to shoot it, we rehearsed half of that day, and then we shot it, and then we started again. So nobody got off the soundstage. So the first time for Penny and me was when we were asked to go to the Macy's Day Parade, to be in the parade.
Yeah.
And I thought, gee, this is great. Mm-hmm. We're going to be in the parade. And so we're on this float, and all of a sudden, this crowd breaks the barriers and starts to run toward us.
Oh my God.
And Penny and I looked behind to see who they were running toward, who was there, because we would have joined the crowd.
Is it a beetle?
Maybe it's a Jagger or somebody. And it was us. And then security had to put us, had to like get the, waylay the crowd or whatever they did. And that was puzzling. And then outside our hotel room, the paparazzi was there, and there were like hundreds of cameras, and we had no idea it was for us. And then when we found out, so then I call that our 2 weeks of headiness, where we thought, wait a minute, for us, we must be some special people. And going back to keeping your feet on the ground, it was because Penny and I never thought of ourselves as more special than anyone else, ever. And so for 2 weeks there, we did, and it was bad. We paid the piper. And so we went back to just being us. But we never knew. When was it for Anson and everybody there?
They went to Texas to play in some softball thing.
Yeah,
and he said they had no sense of how huge this show was. And it was a revelation to all of them. They were just blown away by it. They couldn't believe it.
It's something else, I'll tell you. Yeah. It's just how anybody would imagine it. It's surreal, and it's a blessing, and a privilege, but and you can't ever make it anything else but that. And people are so beautiful, that's I always say, people say, well, what is it? You have fans and they come up to you. Does that ever bother you? And I said, well, it's not like I played Hannibal Lecter. And when people approach me, they approach me with their fun side, their fun and happy side. And sometimes they'll come up and they'll thank me and Penny and the cast, because we got them through a bad childhood. We got them through, they'd watch us, they became our family. And I did that with My Little Marjorie. Remember that show? Anybody? You're
of
probably
course.
But My Little Marjorie and Southern, what were the other shows? You
represented female empowerment. You were, as Weezy said, the first representation of like middle-class, blue-collar women, and your friendship was bonded forever. And I think people, particularly women during that time, really related to your relationship.
Well, yeah. I think that. I'm sorry. Is it Weezy?
Oh, Weezy's a nickname for Louise.
Oh, Weezy.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you prefer to be called?
Oh, Weezy's fine.
You're on.
Yeah.
Okay. I like saying that, Weezy.
Yeah.
That sounds like a character name from Laverne and Shirley.
Well, it was from the Jeffersons, and that's how I got the nickname, because my name is Louise, and I was a page on the Norman Lear shows that year.
And so everybody called you Weezy.
Yeah.
I love it. Weezy and Fritz.
Right.
Those would be two
Hey,
characters.
you were a waitress on the Sunset Strip back when the Sunset Strip was really the Sunset
whiskey
Strip.
stories.
And you got punked by Jim Morrison. You have to tell that story.
Oh, it's so difficult to tell the story because it's an action story.
Yeah.
But I was working at a place. Well, first I worked at IHOP on the Strip, way down though near Hollywood High. And I worked the graveyard shift. And then I got this job at Ye Piccadilly Deli. And then my friend said, they're hiring cocktail waitresses at the Whiskey A Go-Go. Live music, Cindy. And I said, oh my God. So I went over and I got the job, and I had to quit my job at Ye Piccadilly Deli. And I love those people. They were so sweet, but I did. And so the first night after they had trained me, how to hold up, and serve drinks. And they assigned me the VIP section, because there's the peanut gallery upstairs at the Whiskey, where the kids that can't afford to tip and can't afford, to drink more than 2 drinks sit. And there are benches. And then there's the tables downstairs by the dance floor. And then there's the VIP booths. And they gave me the VIP booths. And oh my goodness, I can't believe this. Well, they gave me a table in front of the VIP booth. So they said, "There's your first customers. Go get them." So I go over to this table, and there's this man who's facing away from me, and these two blonde girls. And so I asked them, I said, "What may I get you to drink?" And each of the girls said, "I'll have a Tom Collins." And the other one said, "Tom Collins." And then I said, "And for you, sir?" And he turns around, and they're in a shaft of light is Jim Morrison. And all I'm thinking is, I was just playing the album before I went to work. This is the end. And I'm looking at him, and he looked like a Greek god in this light. And the light was just hitting him in the perfect way. And I said, "What would you have, sir?" And he said, "I'll have a bottle of Jack at the table." And I said, and I wrote down bottle of Jack at table. And so I run over and I put my ticket up, and I'm about to run away back to the other customers. And the bartender says, hold on. You new girl, what is this? 2 Tom Collins and a bottle of Jack? And I said, "Yes." And he said, "We don't serve Jack at the table." And I said, "But," and he goes, "Wait, let me guess. Morrison's in the club, right?" And I said, "Yes. Jim Morrison is over there." And he said, "Well, he knows perfectly well I can't send him a bottle to the table. Tell him he can have a single or a double, but no bottle at the table." And I'm thinking, I don't want to tell Jim Morrison can't have a bottle of Jack at the table. But I go back and I say, "Excuse me, Mr. Morrison, I'm so sorry, but I'm not allowed to bring a bottle to the table. I can serve you a single or a double." And he says, "I've had a bottle at my table before, and I want a bottle here tonight. Who's tending bar? Is it Tony?" And I go, "Yes, it is." And he goes, "You go back and you tell that so-and-so that I want my bottle of Jack on the table. I want it now." So I run back. Meanwhile, I've got other customers trying to flag me down. I run back and I go, "Listen, Tony, I'm sorry." But he goes, "No bottle of Jack at the table." And I go, "But please, can't I?" And he goes, "Absolutely not. You go back there and you tell that so-and-so he cannot have a bottle of Jack at the table." So I go back and I'm in tears now. And I say, "Mr. Morrison, I'm so sorry. I can get you a single or a double, and I'm happy to buy it for you. But I cannot serve you a bottle of Jack at the table." And this went on a couple more times. And finally he says, he takes my hand and he says, what is your name?" And I said, "Cindy." And this is the first time I'd ever heard this termed like this. He said, "Well, Miss Cindy," because he called everyone in those days Miss, and and he said, "Just bring me a double. We're just playing with you." And I looked around, and Tony's leaning over the bar laughing, and all the waitresses and the busboys and Mario, the club owner, and Elmer, they're all laughing at me. And Jim Morrison had punked me. And then after that, they relegated me to the peanut gallery.
Wow, that's how you get initiated at the whiskey.
That was amazing.
That is.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk a moment about Ron Howard, because it was interesting to me that in all corners of your book, he's a recurring theme. And he's a young guy that grew up in show business, but now he's trying to adult in show business. And you're just newly adulting in show business, but you keep intersecting with one another. Talk about that a little bit.
I like that term, Wheezy, adulting in show business. Are you sure we're not going to get canceled using that term?
I think we're good.
Or during American Graffiti, you say?
Yeah, and then your Happy Days, and it just seemed like every time you went somewhere, there was Ron Howard. Like he was like your beacon.
In fact, Ronnie and I had this conversation a couple of years ago. He said, "Wow, we played everything together. We played dates. We played each other's boyfriend and girlfriend. We played high school sweethearts. We played a married couple. And, and then on Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley, we played, two opposite kind of people who dated. But also, which very few people know, Fritz, what's the name of that old show? Inspirations or something that the Catholic Church produced.
With Bishop Fulton Sheen?
Yes. What was that?
I'm not saying I'm old, but that was at the start of television.
It was Insights.
Insights, yes.
I played Ron Howard's mother.
Stop.
Yes. He was in heaven getting ready to be born.
Oh.
And I was ill, and I didn't want the baby, and that was the story. And I played his mother. Wow. And what was your question?
Oh, just that
he's a recurring theme in your life.
He seems to be kind of this beam of light that's guiding you through.
Absolutely a recurring theme. And he has a book out now. I forget, The Boys. The Boys. And he writes about us, trying to go over our lines together, because when he did in American Graffiti, Ronnie was had just turned 18 when he hit the set, and I was 24. Mm-hmm. So, and we had to do like this makeout scene together, and we were really nervous. And it ended up, if you ever see American Graffiti, where I asked George, well, can we go down in the seat and play the scene off camera? And George said yes, and that's how we play it and get into that fight. But anyway, we would learn our lines together, and we would go over the script together, and we dance, because we had that dance scene. We practiced that together, but we were kids, and I was so nervous because I was 6 years older than him. I wore no makeup. Well, there was no makeup or hair in American Graffiti because it was so low budget, and no dressing rooms. But we were both so nervous. And then, we did all these, and we were so nervous about that kissing scene in American Graffiti. Yet on Happy Days, you cut to, I don't know, how many years later was it? 3 or 4. And we had a huge kissing scene where I kiss him, in that, and things had changed. And, but yeah, we kind of grew up together like that. And in a way, in a certain chunk of our lives.
Young adult lives here.
So many of these people had their careers born out of American Graffiti. It was a really low budget movie and George Lucas's first enterprise. Did you have any sense that this was going to go on to become one of the great iconic American movies? And did you have any sense that all these talented people you worked with, Ronnie and Harrison Ford and all these other people who have recurred in our lives over the last 30 or 40 years, did you have a sense that you were going to be part of something that big when you were shooting that movie?
Well, I'll tell you, we thought we were doing a Roger Corman Hot Rod movie. That's it. Even though George had been described to all of us as this wunderkind out of, USC. And we had met with George, Ron and myself, because he met with the whole cast, but just Ron and me and George. And he described American Graffiti as a musical, because he said the music will never stop except for 2 plot points. When the source of the music is gone, when the car rolls over, when the car is stolen. And I remember walking out with Ron, and we looked at each other and said, a musical, genius. But when we were shooting, it was rough because it was shot in 28 nights, one morning. And it was so low budget. Like I said, we had no dressing rooms. We just stand around to wait for our setups out in the dark, way out in Marin County. And so, like I said, we thought we were doing this Hot Rod movie, all of us. And then 2 weeks in, which is half of the film, the shooting schedule, George invited the whole cast to come to the editing bay in San Francisco, and where he had put a 20-minute assemblage of what we've shot so far with music. And by the time we finished watching that, Harrison Ford turned to everybody and said, "This is frickin' great." And we all knew it was great. Wow. And we knew we were in something special then.
Wow. Let's talk for a moment about the friendship that is depicted in Laverne and Shirley, because friendships are messy, and your relationship with Penny was sometimes described as messy.
Oh, yeah.
What did you learn about friendship through not having to, but through sharing that experience with Penny?
Well, I wouldn't call that a shared experience in friendship. We were great friends, when the show was over. I mean, we were just great friends. She's like a sister to me. Mm-hmm. And I'd go over to her house and sit in bed with her and we'd watch TV. But during that time, as much as we were similar, which is the reason for the show, we'd know where the joke was, where the beat was, what wouldn't work. You could take us into any room, anywhere, anytime. Maybe we hadn't seen each other for 15 years, but we'd pick the one thing out together in the room that was funny and interesting, but and make the same comment about it. But during the show, she had a way where she had it all down immediately. I have dyslexia, and things would be just swirling until I put it all together at the end of the week. And she really had no patience for me, and I don't blame her. But we get into arguments about other things. Like I'd say, well, before the show became a 2-person physical show, it was just really Penny that they knew could do physical comedy, her brother and everyone. And so I got upset at that because I said, I do physical comedy. I kept telling everybody that. And finally, after about a season, Gary came down to the set and he said, all right, you've been belly aching about doing physical comedy. We're going to write something for you. And if you do it, well, then, we'll start writing it that way. And so I did this. They wrote this little bit for me and about the vacuum cleaner gets stuck on her lips while we're cleaning house. And they just said, Cindy, Shirley removes it. And so they wanted to see what I do. So I tried putting my foot on her chest and pulling, but I couldn't get my leg up that high. But anyway, it was funny. And so then it became a 2-person physical show. And, things just happened. Things just happened on the show where Penny would get upset about something, and then I'd get upset about her being upset at something. And then she's Sicilian and I'm Sicilian, and there'd be an operatic screaming match. And then we'd say, what do we want to order for lunch? And that would be kind of the way it went. But there was, as you said, a lot of friction, but all's well that ends well.
Right. And you've shared that. And that's like being in a band together, right?
Exactly. But the minute we went on stage, none of that was there. Yeah. None of it. It was all about the place, the thing. And we brought none of that to the stage with us.
And it's also like, you created all these shows together, so you co-parent them for life.
Exactly. One time we had Olivia Newton-John, fabulous person, came down to the set. She was going to ask us to be on her special. And she came down early, and Penny and I were going at it in my dressing room. And then Monica Johnson, the show's producer, said, my God, will you two shut up? Olivia Newton-John's out here, and she's delicate.
Delicate.
So Penny and I said, well, we're not ready to go out there yet. And we kept looking and seeing Olivia, and she was very patient, beautiful, sitting there at the table waiting for us. And I don't think we said, we'll have to talk to you later.
Well, she was busy.
But that was something funny. When I saw Olivia years later, I talked to her about it. She laughed.
She was busy being mellow.
She was, exactly.
Yeah. Now,
she's so mellow.
She's so mellow. Now, you guys have been compared to Lucy and Ethel. And I'm wondering if you ever had a chance to meet them.
No. Wow. Never. But I did do Circus of the Stars remember that? I did it and Lucille Ball was the ringmaster, and it was a dress rehearsal, and we were out on a break in the parking lot, and with the soundstage door was, there, and we were over here, and there were elephants and monkeys and, dog acts and everybody waiting outside on their break to go back, and we were all in costumes. And little Lucy, Lucy Arnaz
Mm-hmm.
was up on a big, big elephant, and she was in some act with elephants. And so Lucille Ball comes out and she sees her daughter and she goes, hey, Lucy. And she goes, hey, Mom. And just then someone screams, look out, he's coming your way. And through the crowd, you hear everyone screaming. Through the crowd comes a chimpanzee in a top hat, a little chimpanzee and a tuxedo, and he's running straight for Lucille Ball. And the trainer's running after him and saying, look out, look out, look out. And she's standing now in the frame of the stage door. And he comes right at her and she goes up on her toes, bows her legs, and the chimpanzee runs right through them. And onto the sound stage. And without missing a beat, Lucy turns to little Lucy and says, Lucy, whatever you do, don't let go of that elephant. So that's my Lucille Ball story. I mean, talk about genius on her feet.
Oh my gosh, for sure.
You mentioned that you were writing that bicentennial sketch show with Francis Coppola. And then you later went to work with him on The Conversation. I love that movie because I just love Gene Hackman, right?
Well, actually, it's reversed. I had done The Conversation and he hired me as a writer.
Oh, I got you. Okay. Well, anyway, it was one of your two relationships with Francis Coppola. And I related to it because you shot it in the Transamerica building, and the whole time you were having a premonition about an earthquake, which is exactly what I would have been feeling were I in the Transamerica building at San Francisco, because I hate earthquakes, and I would have been petrified to be at the top of the Transamerica building.
Well, yeah, that's where we were shooting on the day that they had predicted that California would, there'd be this terrible earthquake and it would float off into the Pacific.
Yeah.
But
how was that film?
It was
really
scary, and it wasn't finished. The building, that's why he shot there, because that floor, it was like the 18th floor or something. It wasn't finished, and or it was higher, and it was scary, and everybody was saying, "Oh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen?" But it didn't, and I knew it. I knew in my heart of hearts it wasn't going to happen. But how many times have they said that about California?
Oh, I know. How was the experience being directed by Francis Coppola and working on that movie? A really interesting.
Well,
dark
he's beyond brilliant. I mean, I had this. He's just an actor. He loves actors, and I had this part in the movie where Gene Hackman is chasing me in the fog, and I run up these steps in a park, and I'm supposed to give him a look, stop and give him a look. And what Francis wrote for me was, the look was to say, if you come one step closer to me, I'll disappear and you'll never catch me. You'll never see me. And I tried it and tried it. I couldn't do it. And finally, Francis came. I said, I can't do this. I just don't know how to do it. And Francis, this is what a brilliant director he is. He said, all right, take every step but the last one, and then turn to Gene. And when you turn, take the last step. And that put the look on my face. So I'm just saying that because he's such a marvelous director.
Wow.
And everything about him is operatic, and that beautiful, just that beautiful Italian art, and everything about him is artful, everything, and operatic artful, and just an incredible. How blessed was I? What a privilege.
Yeah, it was a great university for you to learn your craft. Now, you have a one-woman show. And I want you to talk about that for us, because, as people are just so aching to go out and experience something in real life again, you've got this show. So tell us about it.
Some fun.
Yeah.
Well, I wrote this when I was locked down during COVID, and I wrote it with Charles Duggan, and who's the producer of my show. And it's an hour and a half of fun and laugh out loud. And that's what I was going for. And it does have, when you asked about my life as a child and everything. that's what they asked for. They said, well, we can't just do show business because it's all, but what about before you were 18? What about your childhood? So I said, I'll do it. I'll do that if I can do it in a song. Like, remember when Barbara Streisand sang the Minute Waltz? I have got a minute, just a little minute. I have only got a minute to sing this Minute Waltz. And I said, if I can do it fast like that and put it to song, then I'll do it. So my friend Bruce Kimmel, who is a wonderful composer and writer, and I went to school with, he did put it in a song. And so I sing my Born in a Suburb, they call Van Nuys, and it's to the tune of Davy Crockett.
Right.
Mama was a waitress serving burgers and fries. Daddy loved his liquor, kept it in the chicken coop. If Mama ever found it, she'd knock him for a loop. And then they sing the rest of it, and we talk.
Does it go,
so
Cindy Williams?
Yes. Yes, that's exactly it. Where would
my
she
favorite
go
part is when you come. I don't know if it's after an intermission.
Pardon?
I don't know if it's after an intermission. My favorite part of your show is when you come riding out on a forklift. I said, I like this already. I don't even know what she's saying. It was fantastic.
It's an hour and a half. It's 90 minutes. So that is in the middle of the show. And then I sort of teach Schlemiel Schlemazel, talk about that and how Gary did that and everything.
So where are you going to take it and what's next?
I'm starting in Palm Springs at the Annenberg Theater, January 20th through the 22nd. And then we're not going into LA or anywhere too near there. Then I go to Phoenix and Santa Fe, and then Austin, Texas, Houston, Texas, San Antonio, then Oklahoma, and blah, 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 blah. All over Chicago. I'm looking at it here. I'm getting tired just looking at it. Kentucky, North Carolina, Tennessee, and then back home.
And when people get a chance to meet you, they probably talk about their own friendships that remind them of, or your friendship with Penny and Laverne and Shirley reminds them. I'm sure people tell you all the time, "Oh, this is just like my friendship," and they describe their friendships to you. Is that what happens?
Yeah, not all the time, but a lot of times. My best friend and I were Laverne and Shirley. I was Shirley and she was Laverne. Mm-hmm. And can we have a picture? And we entered the Halloween contest and we won, and just all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have the classic show business stories of roles you regret not having gotten? For instance, you auditioned for Janet in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which ultimately was cast to Susan Sarandon. And I just wonder how you would feel about being played at midnight still in movie houses all over America, because that thing continues today.
God, I'd love it. I would have loved to have sung that song, came down between, but she was marvelous, what was it? In the velvet darkness of the blackest night. But I just couldn't hit those high notes with, that was a real treat. And where we auditioned at the Roxy.
Mm. Oh, wow.
On the Strip.
It's pretty intimidating. Yeah. And all the parts that you talked about not getting, I could still have pictured you in.
Oh, thank you. What a compliment. Yeah. Thank you.
And what were some of the others? I forget.
Oh, some of the others.
Yeah.
That I didn't get or that I turned down, or both.
Yeah. Maybe I just...
Home Alone. I turned that down. Shamefully. I am so ashamed. And Home Improvement. And my friends told me, anything with home in it, Cindy, take.
Yeah.
Don't just mess around.
Let's just go for it. Yeah.
And then Arthur, I was supposed to do, but I didn't. The film with Dudley Moore. And what didn't I get? I auditioned for Star Wars. That's in my show.
Right.
And I have I have my audition tape, and I show it in the show.
Oh,
and,
that's hysterical.
That's worth the price of admission.
It is so bad. But anyway, I have fun with that in the show. And let's see. Oh, Young Frankenstein. I was supposed to, well, I had that part for a couple of weeks, and then they got, who played his, not Terry Garr, but I'm so sorry.
Oh, Madeline Kahn?
Yes, Thank you. Madeline Kahn. It just went right out of my mind.
No, that's okay.
They sprung her from this other movie that she was doing that was the reason they had other people come in and read for the Madeline Kahn part in that.
But I could still picture you doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Louise. I should send you an 8x10 signed.
I would really enjoy that. Now, where else can we find you, and where can people find you on Twitter and on social media, and what else is happening that people should know about?
I'm not really on social media.
Mm-hmm.
It took me 3 days to get off of Facebook at one time because I got scared of it. But for information for the show, you can go to memyselfandshirley.com.
Right.
And there's and that leads you to other Instagram and other social media pages.
We always like to end our show with a benediction, so please tell the story of being blessed by Little Richard before we go.
That was more foreshadowing.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it was the first time I really met Penny, kind of. We were on a double date, ironically, foreshadowing. And we went to see, our dates took us to see Liza Minnelli at the Coconut Grove, and Little Richard was opening for her. So after the show, we were invited back to meet Liza Minnelli, and we were very excited. Penny and I hadn't really spoken because we got to the theater, sat down, the show started. So we're walking backstage to the dressing rooms, and the dressing rooms were like railroad cars. In other words, you had to go through one to get to the next. So for us, the boys our dates had gone ahead of us, and Penny and I were walking side by side, and we're crossing. You had to go through Little Richard's dressing room to get to Liza Minnelli's. So we're walking side by side, and we get in the door frame, and I see him. He's sitting at his dressing table to the right, and he looks up at us and sees us, and he puts his leg up and stops us like one of those car park things, and he keeps it there, and he says, "You two, I want to say a blessing over you two." And Penny and I immediately bowed our heads, and Little Richard proceeded to say the most wonderful blessing over us. And when he was finished, he shouted, "Amen." And Penny and I shouted, "Amen." And he put his leg down, and we proceeded on. Wow. And years from that time, we were Penny and I were on this soundstage of Laverne and Shirley, and I saw this headline on a Variety, on the industry paper, that read Laverne and Shirley Gold in LA. And I called Penny over and I said, "Look at this, Laverne and Shirley Gold in LA. What do you think the reason for our success is?" And she said, "Little Richard's blessing." And I said, "Absolutely." Because he had blessed us. I should have said, done a prayer for our success. And
he was an ordained Baptist minister.
Pardon?
He was an ordained Baptist preacher, wasn't he?
I know that.
And a magical person.
Reverend Pennymaker.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. Wow.
Well, we just want to thank you so much for being with us. We're going to do our closing bit right now, and we'll thank you officially at the end of the credits. But this has just been a wonderful conversation, Cindy. Thank you.
Right back at you. You guys are great.
Thank you so much, Penny.
You're wonderful.
Thank you.
Cindy. Well, if you enjoyed this episode of Media Path, it would help us to be more discoverable by potential new listeners if you leave us a quick review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're new here and this is your first time, check out our back catalog. There's a lot of binge-worthy stuff. For instance, if you want to hear some great conversations with some of America's greatest comics, like Wendy Liebman, Taylor Williamson, Tom Dreesen, who opened for Sinatra for 20 years, Sean Polofsky, Elaine Boozler, who was a groundbreaking lady comic, Wayne Fetterman, who was a producer on The Jimmy Fallon Show, please check us out. Thank you for spending this hour with us, and we would be overjoyed if you took a moment to share your thoughts with us or recommend us to a friend.
We would love for you to join us online on Instagram and Twitter, where we are at MediaPathPod, and on Facebook, where we are MediaPath Podcast. You can find full episodes with all kinds of bonus visual content on our YouTube channel, MediaPath Podcast. We would love to know what media you've been enjoying. You can contact us at our social media or email us at MediaPathPodcast@gmail.com. We want to thank our wonderful, adorable guest, Cindy Williams. Our team includes Dina Friedman, Francesco Demanda, John Maddox, Sharon Bellio, Bill Filipiak, Thomas Hubble, Mason Brown, and you. Our theme music is by me and John Maddox. I am Louise Palanker here with Fritz Coleman and Cindy Williams, and we will see you along the media path.